we have a whole day event planned ahead of us. Maybe I'll slip the itinerary in real quick here before we get going, so you guys can look at this. But we have a whole day ahead planned. We're going to kick off shortly with a little intro on what we're doing over here as the GMI Guild Summit, and then we'll get into a bunch of presentations. We have a bunch of task forces that will be presenting today. We also have a presentation that's going to be done by Parcel on what they're working on, and how they can help us out in the Gotchiverse with their tooling. And then we also have a builders discussion with a bunch of builders in the Gotchiverse who are going to be joining us and speaking on what they're working on. So it's a whole day ahead. I think everybody's going to be on the same page at the end of this. And yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk about why did we start the Guild Summit? GMI started with GMI started with a small group of individuals. There was, maybe 4 to 5 of us who were content creators. Some of us were community ambassadors, and we thought it'd be a great idea to come together and collaborate on things that maybe otherwise would be a little bit daunting to approach on our own, or be able to support each other with our own projects as well that we're working on. And something incredible started happening. We opened the server up to basically the general public, who wants to, any gotchi gang or even non-gotchi gang that wants to come in here and start collaborating and, making things, building things. And we've had this server grow to, I don't even know what we're at now. Definitely over 200 after today. And so I'm looking forward to the future growth of GMI and the things that we're going to be putting out. Some of the crazy things that we've done this last year, where this was, for example, this Nine Adepts screenplay that's going to be ever evolving, written by Friendless Summer, directed by him, and has a whole bunch of GMI in the cast, as well as some really cool artists that have come out of GMI, or were previously artists and have done work through GMI, like Rigo J. Mortis, Bin Laden, Roxiano. And so it's really incredible to see what happens when people can come
Yes, I
together.
did it. High fives. High fives. We're going to have a fun day today. Yeah, boy.
That's right. That's right. I agree. We're gonna have a fun day. That's right. And it's really crazy to see what's going to come together when we see all the guilds and organizations starting to come together and work together, just like we started doing. When we first started as GMI. So it's kind of like we're doing this all over again, but with the guilds and larger organizations. So yeah, let's kick it off. We have Jesse Goldencross, lead summoner of Aavegotchi, who's going to be taking us through his presentation on IP and
Hey.
working with Pixelcraft.
Hello, hello. Can everybody hear me?
Oh yeah,
Okay, nice. I also hear some Zhongwen. Is that
that was Coder
that
Dan. I had to mute him.
Wangbadan?
GM.
All right, very, very good. Well, cool. First of all, Hefe and the whole GMI team, congrats. You guys have gone all out to put this together, and I know it's a collaborative effort, right? Putting it together with everybody that's here, actually, so we can all kind of pat ourselves on the back for just showing up as they say, half the battle, and here we are. So now we just gotta kind of use this platform to. I think we have a great opportunity here to kind of like share some kind of spark notes on what's working, what our blockers are, and if where we see the DAO functioning, and really I think today I'll talk a bit about the kind of landscape for the DAO and what that can be. So yeah, I guess Happy I get to kick it off now, right? And then we'll do some Q&A after, something like that.
Yeah, the floor is yours, sir. I'll let you take it away, and then we'll maybe leave, if you're cool with it, near the end, about 10 minutes. For anybody who has questions, we'll pull them from the chat, and then yeah, if we can do a little Q&A, that would be awesome.
Cool. And I've got a couple info, like just little slides or something I'll drop in the main chat as I go at some point. So maybe some links. First thing I'll start with is just like where we are. If we zoom out and talk about Web3 gaming, this is a bit of what I talked about at the CoinGecko conference just the other day. And this idea of right now, Web3 gaming is like this big thing. And it comes back to defining it. And I think we're very fortunate. Look at it, all of us here. Um, we are a true Web3 game in that we're like an emerging gaming protocol. And I think that's really what a Web3 game is in my mind. It's not a typical game built by a typical studio with a single company and investors who are putting out, you know, a standard game that has some NFTs on top, something like that. So that's kind of the ultimate question: is what's the difference between a traditional video game and Web3 gaming? What's so special about it? And I guess the question is it simply that a player can own their own game assets? And if that's the case, um, is that really that exciting? And I would say that I don't agree that it's just that players can own their own assets. I think that's what we usually talk about, but we forget that when we're like doing outreach and trying to talk to traditional gamers about why this could be something they'd want to be a part of, we need to talk about why that ownership matters in the same sentence. So it's not that you simply own your hard-earned NFT, and maybe it'll be interoperable someday with some other valuable game community that has yet to exist. Um, the feature truly exciting about Web3 games is what we're doing here, which is truly open source, community owned gaming. And so that is the exciting thing to me, and I think most people here. And if we keep that focus in mind, it really is like, I would argue, like a new game genre, because building and collaborating around these game assets and the rules we've set up in the meta, that is half the game. And then the other half is, of course, battle testing it, playing it, and adjusting it. So that's what Web3 gaming is for me. And I think it was really nice to share that message at CoinGecko the other day, because most aren't quite talking about it in terms of DAOs, and most other games out there aren't talking about it in terms of like permissionless access, or being able to like even fork, the game itself or the underlying meta and build other layers of games on top of it, like adding your own rules. And that's kind of the stuff we're setting a framework towards. Is that's the kind of thing Aavegotchi is really first to do, and will continue to innovate in that space. And I think it'll just become a more and more popular genre over time. That's our bet, is that this is, we have discovered that there's a value here. And as more and more people have an ability to get exposed to this and find the right parts of the kind of ecosystem to fit into, the more it's going to grow. So I think Aavegotchi DAO will continue to be a huge force in this kind of true Web3 gaming area. So I think that is our starting point, right? But to do that, it means we have to have a very robust DAO that is functioning in more than one way, and kind of functioning well in all those ways. And so most people, they think of DAOs right now, and they think of token voting, signaling via a token vote that's not even binding on chain, and that's your DAO, and that's your quote unquote governance token. But the truth is, and we see it here executing every day, is you could argue the sig prop, core prop aspect of it. Yeah, that's a big part, and it's a super useful, and so far has been a successful medium of communicating and debating ideas and then executing them. But that's not the whole DAO, right? Like the real DAO is really like all the organizations here today, the guilds, the sub DAOs, whatever you want to call it, the GMI, those are the kind of, not atomic, but like groups that are loosely aligned and actually are kind of organically part of the wider DAO. So we have a much more robust and complex entity emerging that is quote unquote Aavegotchi DAO. You have all these different points of influence and value that are shifting between different aspects and different initiatives. So I think it's that point that we should talk about, where we can make the next year laser focused on expanding on those parts and expanding the strengths. And to do that, we just need a good structure. So there's no perfect answers, but I've done a lot of research on this, and we've worked with our lawyers and seen other entities in the space. And I know people here on the call are also, some of you may be greater experts on this. But for the sake of this call, I wanted to spend a lot of time looking at some of the different ways we could set this up to solve some of the problems that are right in front of us today, kind of blocking us from faster growth. And so when I mention problems, what I'm talking about are basically we have this treasury, and up till now it's been pretty much diamond handed, which is great. And then there's the DTF, the DAO Treasury Fund, and it's a multi-sig, separate and elected through the DAO system. And then we have a few other entities also that might be looking for treasury funding directly or going to the DTF as a secondary source. So the trick to make this all work, though, is that we need some ground rules for funding and how that works, and what kind of entities are available for that. Because we have kind of three things we can't do right now if the DTF is just a multi-sig existing entirely on-chain as a basically unregistered DAO. And if that's what it is, it doesn't have the ability to kind of do any funding in the real world, and it also has trouble getting funding from our treasury, because we can't send, one of the big rules here with AML law is any amount that's significant, quote unquote, needs to have a party that's defined that you're sending it to, right? You think about traditional banking, you always know who you're sending the money to. Some account owned by some person or entity. And of course, we love with crypto that anyone can generate an address at any time. But if we're sending significant amounts to fund someone either in the community or let's say a guild or team, it's really tricky if there's no legal entity or single person that's willing to step up and sign on the line and quote unquote own that, including all the liability that could be there. So that's why usually entities are better. So we have a funding problem, and that goes into the second one, which is contracting. Our ability to do a contract extends beyond just funding. We could have terms that involve switching of ghosts and things, and it is a gray area. But also, what I'm really thinking about here is the IP. And so right now, Pixelcraft, we have the Aavegotchi IP, and we want to be able to share the IP with members of the DAO or basically competent teams that come in through the DAO to build things out. And if we can't contract with another party, it just gets really difficult. So one of the great things to report is a kind of model case that's going through right now. And Friendless Summer and GMI and Pixelcraft, to make sure that just as a kind of, it's like not even a financial thing, but just to show that there's a limited licensing agreement extending Aavegotchi IP to the Friendless Summer scripts in the pilot. And so that whole media production is totally like legally recognized and on-chain, and strengthens our IP for everything else, actually. It's a great win-win-win. But there has to be another party on the other side. And we're almost there now where we're going to have an inked final deal, I think, to kind of be a first model use case. It would have been really nice to have it and announce it today, but we're super close. And what we need to do is start thinking in these kind of terms where if you're willing to incorporate or set up an LLC or a foundation around your passion in the space, that's going to be huge and make it a lot easier for everything else you get when you have your own legal entity. You can more easily grow, more easily bring in more partners, contract with everybody in real life, all that in real life ownership, like bank accounts, stuff like that, being able to do any of that. Sometimes it doesn't matter for what you guys are working on if it's 100% on-chain initiative, but in other cases, these are the type of things that we'll have to tackle. So I'm going to cut to the chase here and share a few DAO structures that might make sense to you. Let me drop in a picture.
You are also able to screen share as well. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. But if you do want to screen share, there's the option for that as well.
Oh, that's good. But I think it's just a JPEG, so
Okay.
just a JPEG. It's not even an NFT.
Okay. I'll right-click save it.
Oh, you know what? Technically, I'm opening it now. It is a PNG. I misspoke. But in any case, let me drop this in. And yeah, if you guys have questions and stuff, I'm looking to. I think this server has different rights. I don't know if I can add a photo to the general chat. Anybody know? It seems like I can't for some reason. Oh, here we go. Come on, baby. No, it's not letting me.
You could DM it to me, and I'll just post it.
All right. Stand by, friends. So what we're going to look at here are just a couple visual aids to go with this idea of how you could structure your DAO. And I'm sending the first. There's 3 slides total. You can just drop the first one now if you want. Hefe. DM to you.
Okay. Yeah, I just got that one, so I'll drop that in the chat.
Cool.
Here we go.
I'm
Here's
sending
the first
all 3 now, though, just to keep those handy.
Oh, wait, hang on. That didn't.
Thank you, Thrax.
It looked like it deleted you too.
Save image. Sorry, I had to save it. I didn't realize.
New server drama. Sorry, guys. New for me. Hefe,
Yeah,
did you get it?
Yeah, I have to save the image.
Oh, okay.
Because I dropped the link. I dropped the link to it. Summit 1. Let's see. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, I didn't realize you didn't have permissions there. My bad.
I think I got it now. Let me try to share it again. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, perfect. There we go.
All right, friends. So if you take a look at this, basically every DAO in the world falls into one of these 2 categories. A lovely little T-chart. Most of them are unregistered on the right side, right? And so let's look at these. Registered DAOs, they're organized according to the laws of a country. They're in some jurisdiction, and they're recorded in some sort of government registry. So this is your LLC, your foundation, these kind of entities. And the great thing about them is you get this increased legal certainty. So this is everything I was just mentioning, ability to contract, and very, very importantly, you get limited liability for the members. So later we'll look at an LLC and that structure. Basically, it's really cool. Like your liability is significantly limited if you're an LLC or some organization like that. And these are not expensive to set up, right? You just got to make sure, you got to look at your membership, how it's going to be structured, and then figure out the right jurisdiction. But that's where, you want to be able to have access to banking. You need to think about, do you need that or not? Obviously, tax types of situations are different in every jurisdiction. But on the whole, that would be the benefits of going the route of a registered DAO, is you can actually have some sort of certainty there. With the unregistered DAO, that's what most are today. They exist entirely on chain, which is really cool. And sometimes that's exactly what you want. You exist outside the legal frameworks and are not registered in a government registry. That does not mean you have no risk or no responsibility. In any case that things were to go sideways, especially with a lot of money at stake in these on-chain scenarios, you would be in a situation with, at the very least, increased uncertainty or liability even for developers, contributors, and members. This is something we looked into not so long ago with the DTF and the multi-sig signers, and this idea that how exposed are they or any risk in terms of where this money goes. And the one example would be, well, what if there was a significant amount of funds sent to a party and we didn't properly KYC or AML that party? You could call that decentralized or not, but if an audit ever came and the multi-sig signers decided to be held liable, that would be a worst case scenario. We looked into it. There's no precedent for that, to be clear, but it goes without saying that there will be cases in the future, and we don't know which way they'll all go yet. And so no doubt, at the very least, there's more uncertainty if you don't have any sort of entity that's on paper signing these things, and instead it's you as an individual. That's just true with everything in life. You could make an LLC just for you go get groceries or something. Wouldn't it's all about a spectrum of risk and then managing it. But more importantly, for what we're talking about today, let's say your guild is super good at something. Like you come from 20 years in XYZ industry. You want to bring Aavegotchi into that industry. So it's like you're pro level. We're super excited to work with you on it, but there's no entity to sign with as a counterparty. Then we cannot do any off-chain operations. If they're these unregistered DAOs, how can they own IP? How can they sign contracts? And of course, they're not going to open a bank account because they're unregistered DAOs. They exist in this parallel universe called Web3, and they exist as a series of wallets and smart contracts. So that's the kind of thing to look at on both sides. And then, that also brings up an interesting point about if you're having, in either case, a multi-sig as part of the core framework for coordinating with members. A multi-sig or maybe multiple multi-sigs is very common. It goes without saying you would want to have those people be, in my opinion, doxed and at least revealed to themselves and any parties they are contracting with. And so definitely much easier if it's a registered DAO. That's pretty much taken care of. But if it's an unregistered DAO, like currently the DTF, for example, currently it's unregistered multi-sig that's going to handle funds. And so the question is, we need to know who's on the multi-sig. It can't just be a Discord ID or literally just an anonymous wallet. You just think of it from a worst case scenario. If I'm asked, did I do due diligence and kind of play by the kind of common sense rules of the old world, which ones of those still would apply here, even though it's just a new technology? So you want to have everybody kind of known on who's party A, who's party B. That's really all it comes down to. And so you want to have good people in those positions, and you need to think about, it's one thing to be a member of the DAO. It's another to be maybe a multi-sig signer at one of these committees or on these seats, these very important seats. They should be analyzed in terms of OPSEC, security. Are you on a hardware wallet? Are you just on a MetaMask? What are you doing? And you want to be a multi-sig signer. Temperament, reliability, and transparency. Like when it comes to how we conduct ourselves in terms of this multi-sig, there should be some clear rules that go with it. Dr. Wagme's done an amazing job with a standard operating procedures doc for guidance for the DTF. Highly recommend reading that if anybody's got a link. That's something we probably should look at a few times throughout the day. So that's key. And like I said earlier, AML, when it comes to a significant fund, every lawyer is going to have a different answer, but generally we like to think if rule of thumb, if it's more than $1,000 worth of crypto, we definitely need to identify who that is. Even 500, there's really no downside to knowing who you're sending funds to every time. So good rule of thumb there. Okay, I'm going to drop in the next slide here. Keep it moving for everybody. Diving into the registered side a little bit, because that's what we're not yet, but we want to consider. And we'll get into, I see some questions coming around about the different states and LLCs and Wyoming. So look at the registered options. There's a bunch, and I'm going to give full credit here to Salome Bernhard. You can check out her just published piece at primedao.mir.xyz. It's very thorough. It's a bit, from conclusive and from her perspective, but so be aware there's other takes and other perspectives out there, but not legal advice. But it is a very thorough piece on DAOs, and looked at all the options she kind of goes through. And I think the two that pertain to us the most are the offshore foundation option and the LLC. So, but the offshore foundation, you see popular places like Panama, Cayman, also Singapore, and BVI. And so in general, you get flexibility with the funding. It could interact with the DAO membership and even provide grants to entities all over the world, including the U.S. So it could, contract with them, send funds to them, just like any other business. You would just have documentation of where and when you sent funds or received funds, and it would work very, very well for those kind of purposes. It's also interesting because my understanding is the DAO members don't they don't own the foundation or are quote unquote wrapped by it. There's just an explicit relationship between the foundation and the DAO. It's in their constitution, and then it's also in the responsibilities of kind of the key roles. Typically, you'll have because it's a foundation, it's structured differently. You're going to have a nominee director, a secretary, and a treasurer, and those three key roles, in addition to a local director for whatever jurisdiction you pick, those three roles, like in our case for Aavegotchi, we could have an election for those three roles or something. Like I'm talking here about the highest level, like the Aavegotchi DAO itself. If we go with the foundation in Panama, which is what is our leading consideration right now, if that's ultimately the way everybody wants to go with it, we could kick off with basically a director, a secretary, and a treasurer. And I would just stick a note on that one for now, but leave it with the thought that those are it's unclear. Like you might have a lot of paperwork and work with that, but I think it's no more than 10 to 20 hours a week, and you're going to have very quiet times where you're pretty much just on paper, representing and the organization. But that said, the treasurer should have experience with treasury management. The CV should match the role. The director should have executive experience and ideally, be somebody that can be extremely trusted and competent and that kind of thing. So, but experience, I would say, matters. Like this is not a good place to do testing grounds for my first time as a CEO or running a treasury, because there'll be a lot of funds at stake. But that's the offshore foundation option. It could also be a good consideration for, depending on your use cases, your guild, your something like GMI, perhaps. And then the other one is an LLC, which might be the lighter lift of the two, depending on your jurisdiction. Like if you're in the US, LLCs are extremely common, and you could simply set one up. We have independent developers do this all the time. They set up their own legal entity, often an LLC or sole proprietorship, and that just gives them some liability. And also, it's a business then, so you got tax write-offs, all that kind of operating expenses. You get to keep receipts, all that good stuff. So a lot of people do it just for themselves. And if you're going to be very active in Web3, and it might behoove you to just get a kind of parallel version of yourself that's an LLC or sole proprietorship. But even for, let's say, your guilds or even a specific limited scope project that the DAO comes together and wants to start, it's probably worth the minimal startup cost to form an LLC. And that could be, like, one example is an LLC created by multi-sig managers for the sole purpose of protecting them as the holders of the token, so that the LLC and not the individual is the multi-sig holder. So you just offshoot all that liability to the LLC. And it also isn't just liability, it gives you clarity on who's responsible for what, and any sort of compensation and all that stuff can be kind of a little bit more formal. Although I'm always an advocate for, if you can do the on-chain streaming and just hard code rewards and bounties into the code, that's always better. But you get my point here. It's very, very helpful for treating it like a business, being able to grow it, attract capital, investors. Any of that suddenly gets a little bit more clarity with an LLC. The Wyoming DAO, according to Salome's piece, it offers very, very little in benefits over a traditional LLC. So it seems like from her perspective, and I've heard similar things from some of our own legal, it's just like unclear what the benefits of the Wyoming DAO is at this point. There's some rules, and you can't have a very big group. I think it's very limited in the number of members you can have. And if you go with a traditional LLC, you can kind of have even more flexibility. So also, it's important to note how much liability you have. It's limited by the amount of capital you individually have invested as a member. So members could have like buy-ins in a sense, their investment into the pie, and that would be the extent of their liability. So I hope this is helpful for everybody. I'm going to go back and see what people are writing.
Oh yeah, very helpful, very informative. I also wrote down a few questions that I have, but also that I've seen in the chat. And I
Okay,
know you
great.
have also one more slide too that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I thought we'd zoom out real high to end here. And this is super oversimplified on purpose. So I'm just going to drop it in here and we can look at it together. So this is kind of an overview of a very simplified overview of how I see this could work. And so you have the Aavegotchi DAO treasury in the middle, and then the DAO itself. Whenever things move from the treasury, initially at least, there's a sig and a core prop, right? Like that thing doesn't move without a core prop. And then what we could do is say, for example, some of the funding or the IP management, some of those roles of the DAO, although they could be offshot to more like councils, right? This is our task forces. So you start to see things like DTF. It literally is DAO treasury, So it makes sense that there would be basically a one-time core prop to fund DTF X amount, maybe quarterly, maybe annually. I don't know. Maybe this has already happened, and you see the details of that. But that DTF from there would have much more leverage and could be much more agile in figuring out where to prioritize and what to fund and that kind of thing, right? And so that gives us the agility that everything can't be a core prop kind of deal. You do a one-time core prop to a trusted group. Maybe they have a registered DAO. Maybe there's an LLC with the DTF, so that we can contract with them, and maybe that's possible. Maybe it's not. But that's something we can talk about over this summit and over the following days and weeks. But it would be great if the Treasury became a foundation. DTF was able to contract with them, and importantly, DTF needs to be able to contract with whoever they're sending funds to, and also identify those people. And that's why I say even like those green circles represent individuals, smaller projects. It could be a couple of co-founders, all sorts of great ideas and things that need attention and funding could all be done through, maybe a combination of funding and a licensing agreement. And that's the example there with GMI. You'll notice it's not a ghost token, but an Aavegotchi. And the idea of basically working with GMI sources the talent, the creativity, and everything you guys do. And occasionally you're going to come up to situations where this is something for commercial use that needs the Aavegotchi IP. And so we just contract. It's unclear. It might be that best that we contract directly with the individual entity that's going to actually use that IP. But at the very least, GMI would be like kind of a matchmaker. And if it worked out legally, then it could even be maybe that GMI just has a certain right to extend the license to other parties. The key here is in both these situations, it's really hard to get the IP extended to the green dots, the green circles, if they're not defined either as an individual or as an entity of some kind, LLC, foundation, etc. So that's kind of the message here today is if you've never made your own company before, if you've never incorporated or done anything along those lines, it's really not that bad. We could get like a support channel to share experiences and how we do it. But sometimes depending on your jurisdiction, you could create a company for like $500. You get a corporate secretary. They get you all your paperwork, documentation, and then it's just about good bookkeeping, keeping track of your records, your agreements, that kind of thing. Maybe get a DocuSign, call it a day. It's really not too bad, and it just would add, I think, a lot in certain situations, especially things like DTF or GMI. And for some of you, you may be hearing it and thinking, well, we can do everything on chain. For others, I know there's guilds like that are well established, legitimate companies, years in the making, and we can contract with them today. That's the advantage for those partners. We can contract with traditional established Web2 businesses too all day, or brands, or what have you. But we want to, kind of in conclusion, like, of course, we want to have, I guess I could say, like a prioritizing of Aavegotchi community made content or or projects. So it's almost like PMO, like project management too. And so, of course, we're going to prioritize working with anyone that's truly in Gotchi gang and talented and understands the vision of Aavegotchi from the get-go and is part of it, as opposed to maybe something else, like working with Nike or something. We could do both. But I'm talking about in terms of, as an example, we could contract with Nike today. But if it's a certain guild that only exists on the blockchain, it just gets a little tricky. And we don't want to undermine the IP. We've put a lot of time and effort into protecting the IP. We've got a great IP office out of Singapore. They've got us registered with trademarks for Aavegotchi in all the major like jurisdictions. There's the whole Eurozone, there's Russia, there's China, and of course the US, and others. So they're working across multiple jurisdictions. And so a lot of this is just, if push ever came to shove, we can actually look back and see precedent or cases where we did license IP. That just makes the IP stronger for everybody. It's like if we went, let's say there was a nefarious troll play or something, and we decide as a community we wanted to go after them, it'd be really hard if we didn't have strong IP protection. And so luckily currently Pixelcraft manages that part because it is a private limited company based in Singapore, incorporated, and is able to do things like run a bank account and have IP and own IP. So that's the difference, and that's why we should, I guess, as a parting message, consider either creating a DAO foundation or LLC or some sort of entity like that. Continue to look into it, or kind of do it. There is one other model, which is, well, it's really the foundation model. We're kind of doing it as a hybrid approach, where you could make an entity that is like in Pixelcraft Studios' case, we are a software development house, legal on paper. We're building software. We're a game studio, and so we happen to contract and work with Aavegotchi DAO. Right, from the very first votes, there was the Aragon faucet into Pixelcraft to support us to build out the ecosystem. So that's kind of the working relationship. It may be that GMI is on chain, but there's another entity that kind of shadows or parallels it. So that's some of the. This is an introduction to the murkiness that is how do we create an organic kind of emerging ecosystem of DAOs and sub DAOs and guilds that are all working together. We get to share this IP, and then we get to grow the whole ecosystem together and align incentives. So I'm very hopeful for the future. Some of you may have heard this and had other ideas. So I view it as another opening of the conversation. And, I don't have all the answers, but we can share resources. We do. I'm even thinking like we didn't have quite have time for this summit, but we could do like an AMA where we start bringing in legal scholars or lawyers to share their views, because there's a lot of different perspectives and thoughts right now on where things are going. So it's evolving fast. It's a fascinating space to be in for legal. It's about the least boring legal you could be in right now. So with that, I'd just love to be able to share more IP and bootstrap some of these DTF and other organizations so that we can have an awesome second half of the year where Pixelcraft isn't like the only legal entity working with Aavegotchi DAO. I want to see like a half dozen, then a dozen of quality, awesome teams that are being born out of the Aavegotchi ecosystem. Just like we've seen the guilds flourish, let's take it to the next level and let's get kind of quote unquote legit so that we can attract more capital, attract more partners, do more deals, contract with one another, and really grow the space in a powerful way. So that's kind of the message for today. I really hope that helps, and I'd love to continue the conversation throughout the summit, and of course, forever and ever into the future. So just feel free to DM me if you have questions, or maybe at the appropriate time we'll set up a kind of channel somewhere where we can continue this conversation. So open to ideas. Any questions now? I guess I could take a few, or if I'm over time.
No, you're not. I mean, this was a very valuable conversation. The room kind of got quiet halfway through, but I think it's because people were just like really digging into the details of this and hanging on to your words there. But I think basically the takeaway for me here is, the LLC model or like one of the other models you'd mentioned, they could potentially be like a key part of transactions taking place between our DAOs. As we get district DAOs. And other organizations emerging in the Gotchiverse as we kind of, like you said, flourish as a space, and almost looking at guilds and DAOs as a small business that's run
Yeah.
by all these individuals, decentralized individuals, but also having security layers in place within the DAO. Maybe you get to a certain point in the DAO where now you actually do have to be doxxed. Like you said, with the treasury management, that I envision that would probably want to be one of those positions where you're fairly vetted to be in that position. And then maybe there's like different levels of security where someone from the outside, from a Twitter space, can join the DAO, but they don't really have much effect on the actual DAO operations. Then you have the voting members, and then you have the multi-sig signers. So
Yeah, and that's why I guess the other advice is just don't overthink it. Keep it simple. I mean, when we started the Aavegotchi kind of summoning it, we knew it was going to be this kind of parallel setup where the DAO existed immediately on chain from the first minting of the first ghost, but at the same time there was this explicit we're setting up Pixelcraft Studios to be basically the first client to work with the DAO. But it's not a complex organization or anything. It's a simple private limited. Depending on your jurisdiction, you could probably have something like that. And like I said, a lot of indie devs have something like this just for themselves because they're working from home and running their own business. So in terms of seeding and all that, it's going to be different case by case, but don't overcomplicate it. That's all I'd say is like, and we could have follow-up talks about this if there's other ideas or specific areas we want to like dive deeper into.
I guess I'd seen a question from Thrax that was just asking, with the DAO side of the partnership, is there any kind of paperwork? He's asking, is there any kind of paperwork, or is that just something that happens to be another entity that you're dealing with the DAO? Say you're a content creator, for example. Would you be doing any paperwork saying, okay, I'm dealing with a DAO, or is it just I'm dealing with this LLC that's doing this as an organization? They also happen to have a DAO voting structure kind of thing.
It gets really confusing if we don't use like very specific examples, I think. So for terms of keeping it easy, let's make a scenario. Like what if, and just picking on No Futuristic here, right? He made a NFT with some music, right? So he makes great music. What if, or him and who makes great beats in the community? Ben Lagan?
FaZe does great beats of he's actually done some renditions of like our Aavegotchi beats, but with his own kind of style.
All right, and hardcore too, but we're gonna go with FaZe. Let's say FaZe and No Futuristic. I like, dude, we're gonna do a whole album, and we wanna make it like for sale. We wanna sell these, make it for commercial purposes, to get some profit. Really turn this into a thing. See if there's an appetite for it in the market, and that's the collab you need. And then, like in theory, and I'm making this up as I go, maybe they would just come directly to Pixelcraft, who, from a legal perspective, is holding the IP, and say, "Hey, we want to do this thing, so we want to use Aavegotchi branding and everything throughout, and kind of make it a official Aavegotchi project, quote unquote, like licensed official project with that little foil sticker on it, just like back in the day." And in that case, like we could just do a simple, licensing agreement. It could come to a point where, what if GMI had a network, and maybe you do, where you would have like a traditional records label. You might have distribution channels and ways to blow it up. Like, we can get you on Conan O'Brien tonight, and we can get you in Rolling Stone next week. That kind of thing. Then that's the kind of value transfer you'd want to be able to contract that, like. They're doing a duo record signed to GMI, and GMI should be able to, make a legit kind of deal with them where the royalties, all that stuff could be set aside, and everybody's able to support one another. And it's not charity work. It's like everything's very clear and defined. I think that's really all we're trying to do here. So maybe not the best example I could make up on the spot, but I just really wanted to shout out No Futuristics rap skills.
But also, just a takeaway point from that is, really things like GMI could be instrumental in empowering other content creators, but also having those defined structures within GMI will help us, know how we're going to be compensating who for what. Because right now it's like there is, some funding coming in for some projects, but really everything's kind of loose because we're all just working together. But once we become more of a defined structure, we can define roles as well, and then based on the roles, there can be compensation, and then you can ask for more for certain compensation, and I think it maybe opens a lot of doors to be an LLC. I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, and also leave time for the next slot. But the question I had was, we have content creators, we have game developers, we have these more independent builders in our space and creators. Would it be opportunistic for them to create their own LLCs in order to maybe open up possibilities to work with Pixelcraft directly? If they're, for example, if they are not going to be working through a party B like GMI, for example, if we were to legally incorporate.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I think either way is possible. So it just matters. It's all about the value add. That's why I was kind of trying to make the point there is like maybe why would Future go straight to the Treasury or just straight to Pixelcraft to get the IP if going through GMI has all these ABCD benefits, right? Like if there's a value add because you guys are in the industry, maybe you got a friend in Hollywood, whatever it is, like if it's if you're really good at what you do, then people are going to want to go through that thing. So for GMI, I guess would be media and that distribution and amplification. For DTF, it's more about just managing, okay, we've got this much budget for this much time. We want to get it to the most competent, ideas and teams out there that can have an impact right away and what that strategy is. So DTF would have a lot of flexibility there. So, but in terms of the IP side, I think, yeah, it's like, if working with GMI is better than not working with GMI, then that's why they'd want to go that way. It's all about the value.
Yeah, fair enough. That makes sense.
So yeah, very excited for all of it. Very hopeful. It's like I think the upcoming Parcel talk is going to be huge because it kind of ties into everything we're talking about today. You kind of want to have good documentation and be able to contract, and that's really all it is. So. It's not expensive to get set up. We could get started and get that corporate secretary, and boom, you're off and running. So I maybe oversimplified it there, but I'm going to end it on that note and just say I'm excited for the Parcel presentation.
No, I love it, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us and really bring out us, kick off a conversation around something that it's probably feels about the right time to start having. As we see, more guilds coming in, organizations that started many months ago, now actually getting their feet on the ground and starting to, generate some possible revenue and getting more and more interest. I think it's time to start talking about that stuff, and I appreciate you also extending the invitation afterwards for maybe some follow-up AMA or whether we open a support channel. There's lots of opportunity there.
Yeah, because like I said, there's no silver bullet. We got to figure it out as we go. It's a very organic thing, which is really cool. We've developed so far with the cocoon and everything. So I'm just so proud of Aavegotchi DAO. And when we look at especially the amazing growth of the guilds, you look at like YGG and Guarantee. I mean, they're incorporated, right? Like they've gotten to a point where they're a huge organization and they've figured all that stuff out. But we don't have to wait. We can start sooner, and it may help us all grow faster. I guess that's it. So, okay, thanks.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you being here as an enlightening conversation. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you guys. And super excited for the rest of the day and be taking notes.
Right on.
Our next guest ties right into this, right?
Go ahead. Yep. You take it. Go ahead. Take it away. We got, I believe, Parcel, right?
Yep, Parcel is up next, presenting some payment OS for the contributor economy. So that will actually tie into these very same types of circles and getting people on your teams paid.
Yeah, this is kind of like I'm looking at this now, looking at that last presentation, looking at this as like step number 2, maybe, or step number 1. But I think maybe, you know, after you become a legal entity, it's like, okay, now let's figure out how we can manage our gnosis better. So I know many people in here, you know, guilds, organizations have started to use Gnosis Safe as a tool to, you know, accept payment, manage some guild assets, and that sort of thing. And I feel like that's right up Parcel's alley. Do we have Parcel in the house? Do we have a Parcel speaker?